I'm so excited to be a co-learner with all of you today as we head into our keynote presentation, and it's my honor to introduce Flower Darby. Let me say just a few words about Flower. Flower Darby is currently the Associate Director of the Teaching for Learning Center at the University of Missouri-Columbia. Prior to that, Flower spent nearly 28 years at Northern Arizona University as faculty and in a variety of leadership roles encompassing instructional design, student success, and online and innovative pedagogies. She is the lead author of Small Teaching Online with James Lang, who, as Erica mentioned, was the keynote speaker for this conference in 2021. And Flower's latest book is the co-authored Norton Guide to Equity-Minded Teaching. Throughout her work, Flower celebrates and promotes effective teaching in all class formats to include, welcome, and support all students as they learn and succeed. We are grateful to Flower for helping us advance our knowledge and practices around inclusive and equitable teaching in all modalities. Flower, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you to everyone again. I already put this in the chat box, but I'm going to vocalize it. Thank you for choosing to spend your time in this effort. I do not take that for granted, and I'm so grateful to be able to be here with you today. I have a lot to share. I've been a little bit accused of coming across like a fire hose, so I'm just going to give you the small teaching wisdom, all credit to Jim Lang. I encourage you, if you're a note taker, maybe jot down some ideas that resonate with you today. But please, I have lots of strategies. Please do not go forth and do them all at once, because that is a recipe for disaster. I know from personal experience that it does not go well when we try too many new things at once. I have ideas here today that you might choose to use next week or next semester, but don't do a lot of them. Take notes, maybe try something, come back to your notes when you feel that you have that comfortably in your toolkit, and maybe try something new again later. So lots to share with you today, and I'm doing that on purpose because I'm here for such a short time. I just want to make this as worthwhile for you as possible. So we are going to be talking about the small teaching strategies that can help your students be successful. I'm just pulling up my slides here. And just a quick one more tiny little housekeeping note. I do encourage you, if you want to, if it's helpful for you, to collaborate with each other and share ideas in the chat box, but I'm not going to be looking at it because I'm making a very deliberate decision to keep my eyes on you. This is an immediacy cue. This reduces the distance between us. And if you are teaching by camera, whether live or recorded, I encourage you also to really develop the habit of looking straight at the camera. So that means that I'm not necessarily watching the windows, I'm not watching the chat box, except for a couple of times during the talk. I'm going to ask you a question and invite you to respond in the chat box. Just they're kind of one-word opportunities, and I'm just adjusting that so I can see that easier. So if at that time, I will turn my eyes to the chat box, but other than that, I'm not going to. If any of my hosts, if anything comes up and you need to interrupt me, please just unmute and let me know that we need to do something differently. Okay, cool, ready to go? Let's go. I want to introduce you to who I am when I'm not in my Zoom box. I spend a lot of time in here, but I also have a life. This is my family, my amazing husband, Tim. If you've read Small Teaching Online, he's referenced throughout because he is the other half of my mind, and we really collaborate well together. A lot of that book was based on observing his experience as an online master's student as well. We have 3 teenage daughters, which is super fun, as you can imagine. And we love to travel. And recently we had the opportunity to go to one of our favorite locations, which is London, something, of course, that we weren't doing for a few years there. So there's a couple of pictures of our family playing in London and just enjoying time together. Now, why am I taking a precious minute to do this? It's because it's a strategy that I would encourage you all to consider as well. Help your online students see you as a real person. Now, this is going to vary the way that you do this based on your identities, based on your personality, your preferences. You may not choose to show the faces of your family members to your students. That's okay. My family, they're used to it by now, but do something, do lots of little things throughout the entire semester, not just at the beginning, to help your students see who you are as a real person. Certainly, I recommend All About Me video if that's not something that you already have, or even just a slide or a page in your online course to show a few pictures. Certainly, it could have your professional headshot, but also maybe something about you when you're not working, maybe a hobby or a pet. Anything like this is a great way to invite connections with your students, and that is crucial for online student success. Now, let me just actually pause and say I am couching all of this today in asynchronous online teaching, but I've received feedback before that a lot of what I talk about can apply no matter where you're teaching. So do be thinking about where you might take some of these strategies. And just as I mentioned before we move on, help your students keep getting to know you as a real person. Our online students constantly tell us that they think that we're not real. They really do not think there's an actual person on the other side of the screen. So whether that's including memes in your announcements, whether that's including emojis in your emails or assignment feedback, whether it's sharing a quick photo from your weekend hike, whatever it might be, help your students continue to see you as a real person in order to help them be successful online. It's going to foster their greater connection, their greater motivation, their greater engagement, all of which are necessary ingredients for better and more durable learning. So I've already talked for a couple of minutes here. Let me turn and ask you a question. This is one of those opportunities to get involved in the chat box if you choose. If you don't want to, that's okay. What is one word that describes the way that you feel about your online teaching? If anybody would like to put a word in the chat, empowering, love it. Thank you so much. How are we feeling about online teaching today? Engaged, wonderful, thank you. Different, it is different than in person for sure. Yes, flexible, yes, fun, evolving. I like that word, evolving. Hopeful, community, good, love it. Seeing some greetings coming in as well. Thank you all for saying hello, that's great. Ambitious, intense, ooh, I don't often see that word. Frenetic, okay, these are some good words. Supportive, yes, thank you. Sometimes I appreciate the positive tone here today, I really do. Gratifying, yes, all of the above, thank you. Sometimes when I ask this question, I get some responses that are not quite as positive, and I see one right here. It's anxious, right? Hesitant, distanced, yes. And I think it's important to acknowledge that we experience this range of emotions and this range of experiences on any given day. I suspect you've experienced all of these different things. I know I have in my online teaching career, where sometimes it just doesn't feel very fun, quite frankly. Sometimes it doesn't feel like we're connecting with people. So, but on other days, we are very mindful of the opportunity that we're offering to our students to pursue that college credential and making it possible for them to get that degree while they're managing other responsibilities. So I know that we are like-minded and we are here to help our students, but I also think it's okay to recognize that sometimes it may not feel quite as buzzy as teaching in person. Now we're going to come back to this activity and this word a little later in the talk. So let's go ahead and move on. And I want to tell you about something that happened just a couple of years ago. I also teach Pilates. I'm just a person with a lot of interests. And one day in June of 2020, I think it was literally right after the book came out, no, 2019, I was getting ready to teach at my local gym, and I was walking into the club, and it was a beautiful summer day. And I was like, nobody's even going to come to class. Who would want to come in and do Pilates with me? But I saw a woman in the parking lot walking into the building with her rolled up yoga mat. And I thought, okay, maybe here's somebody. So I went in and I rounded the corner into the hallway where the studio is. And I saw her standing outside the open door. And I thought, why doesn't she go in? And immediately I could answer myself. I thought it's because she doesn't know if she's supposed to. The door was open, but the lights were off. There was no music playing. I wasn't there yet. And she was the only person who had come to class yet. And I thought, she doesn't know if she's supposed to go in. So in that moment, and I even picked up on a little frustration or confusion. It's class even happening? What's going on? So because I kind of identified that, I said to her, are you here for class? And she said, yes. And I said, great, me too. Let's go in. We got the lights on. We got the music playing. More people showed up. We proceeded to have a really great class. But it really got me thinking about the experience that our students have when they click into our asynchronous online classes. The lights are not on, the music is not playing. They don't see anybody else there in the hallway or in the room. They're just in there trying to figure it out. And even if we do everything that we can, which I encourage us to create a welcoming atmosphere, and I'm going to talk more about how we can do that, it is still the case that we are not there in real time, nor can we be at all the different time zones that our students might be logging in. And so I just like us to think a little bit about how we greet students, how we welcome them, how we support them as individual people who might be experiencing a little frustrating. Is anybody even in here? I don't know. So that's just an opening story to get us thinking here today. What we're going to do briefly is discuss 3 guiding frameworks just to show that we have a solid theoretical foundation. We're going to talk about some very practical ways that we can engage our students and include them, and then we're going to turn our attention to some even more practical kind of structural things that we can do as well. We're going to look at cognitive connections and things from learning science in the last part of the talk. And as we know, we'll have time for questions at the end. So as I was just alluding to a minute ago with our what one word activity, I think it's really necessary to acknowledge that there are, in fact, challenges with online teaching and learning, that sometimes it feels isolating, it feels distanced. Our students tell us they don't think we're real. And quite frankly, I have had the experience many different times of just seeing my students as names in a grade book and not actually people with hopes and dreams and challenges and joys and competing demands on their time. So I just think it's important to recognize that the very nature of what we're doing can raise some barriers, but there are things that we can do. And that's what we're here today to talk about. We know that it is so important to foster the connections and the community in our classes. And we know that in order to do this, it's going to help our students. I mean, like when we foster these connections in community, it's going to help our students who are really struggling right now, right? I mean, this is a very unique moment in time in higher education in the United States. We are dealing with so many challenges and our students are struggling. And sometimes maybe even we feel a little bit like this, dealing with all the challenges that we're facing in higher education. But what I'm going to argue today is that in order to help this student, maybe who's struggling, who's feeling isolated, we need you. You are the key. You are the answer. No pressure, right? But it's you, because you have a superpower. Your students want you. And what's going to happen is when you open up a little bit more to your students, when you invite them to know who you are, they're going to reciprocate. They're going to send energy back to you. It's going to refill your teaching cup and recharge your teaching battery. So we're going to talk today about things that you can do without getting overwhelmed. We got to keep that small teaching mode in place here. Little things that we can do that aren't overwhelming, that can really help our students. So we're going to look at these guiding frameworks. The first one, very briefly, I have to go quick through these. The Community of Inquiry Framework came out of research in the late 1990s, where the researchers wanted to know what goes into a good online class so that it doesn't feel like an electronic correspondence course. They identified the 3 spheres in the middle of the graphic. Cognitive presence makes sense in a teaching and learning environment. It's the thought work. Teaching presence and social presence, this is where I think we're still kind of grappling. How do we guide learning? How do we facilitate growth and knowledge acquisition? And how do we deal with our online students like real people, with the social interactions that we're missing, with those, we don't have that opportunity to have that spontaneous greeting in the hallway. But you notice that each of these presences are equally important. And then in 2012, another couple of researchers came along and said, great, but also there's some other thing that we need, and that is to acknowledge our emotions. Now, as we were just talking about a few minutes ago, our emotions impact, well, we didn't actually say this, but they do, right? Emotions impact everything that we do in life, and we don't check them at the door when we come into our online classes. We bring our emotional state with us. And if we're having one of those days where we feel a little more distanced or challenged by the opportunity to interact with our students, that's going to impact how we interact with our online students. Now, the good news is that we can actually put this to work for us. We can harness the power of positive and productive emotions, and we'll talk a little bit about how we can do that to enliven our online classes and support our students' success as well. We're also basing everything we're talking about today in Universal Design for Learning framework, which is a neuroscience-based set of guiding principles to recognize that every student learns in unique ways. Now, oftentimes this is associated with disability accommodations or assistive technologies, but it's more than that. And when we expand our thinking, it really gives us a powerful way to be proactive in supporting all of our students. This comes out of the built environment, the physical world, where if we see a ramp that goes up next to a set of stairs, we know that ramp was put there according to universal design which is what it's called, to help somebody using a wheelchair get to where they need to go without making any special requests. But what we also know about that ramp is it helps all kinds of other people for whom it wasn't put there. People using a stroller or who have a suitcase on rolly wheels. Lots of people benefit from that ramp. And this is the exact same idea. We can design proactively and provide supports and options for students who may need those accommodations, but that also benefit every student. And so one very easy example is if we do have videos in our classes, they really should be captioned so that students who have a hearing impairment can still access that material and get to where they need to go with that video content. But also, a lot of people turn on the captions. It just helps them process the information in different ways. So they might use the captions to return, find a place in the video that they want to revisit. So this is the idea, is that we provide supports and options in ways that can help all of our students as well. And I think I took out my third guiding framework, but I'll just very quickly mention that we're also involving culturally responsive pedagogies as well, as we seek to welcome and include and support all of our students. Some of the ideas that I'm going to share with you are drawn from that sort of set of theory and principles as well. So it's time. I have so many strategies to share with you. We are going to jump right in, and I'm going to start deliberately focusing on how we foster the connections between people and emotional connections too. So in K-12, there's a lot more focus on social and emotional, ways of engaging students, but it's equally important in higher ed. I don't think we're doing such a good job here in our world. We know that students are not brains on sticks. This is a phrase that one of my colleagues who has written a book called Minding Bodies uses. Students are not brains on sticks. They are whole people. And so are we. We are whole people. And when we foster these kinds of social connections and emotional connections, once again, the literature is very clear. It fosters deeper engagement, more motivation. Those two things are necessary for learning. So the first idea I want to share with you today is to bring your passion to create the atmosphere. This is based on a phenomenon called emotional contagion, which implies or means that we impact and we're impacted by the emotions of the people around us. Now, you have seen this. Sometimes when you're teaching in person, you leave the room and you're like, wow, everybody was on fire today. And then other times you leave the room and you're like, boy, everybody's kind of blah. Well, that's emotional contagion, and it happens online too. There is an atmosphere in your online class. And when you choose to bring your enthusiasm, your energy, your love for what you do, for the content that you teach, for your students' learning, it elevates and invigorates the entire atmosphere. It energizes your students. They feed that energy back to you. So I'm making a very deliberate attempt to model this to you right now by sitting up tall in my chair and amplifying my presentation. I'm kind of giving you about 200% of my energy. This is exhausting. When I'm done here, I'm going to collapse in a heap on the floor, but I'm here with you because clearly I am passionate. This is what I do. We have so much potential to benefit our students and help them to make a better lives for themselves when we bring our enthusiasm. So once again, if you're teaching to a camera, recorded or live, amplify your presentation because the camera eats energy. That's only one way. We can also do this in the way that we write to our students. A lot of what happens in online classes is about, is through the written word. So as an example, when I first started teaching asynchronous about 15 years ago, I used to send announcements that sounded like this. Don't forget you have a quiz on Tuesday. Why was I writing like that? That's not how I talk to my students. I learned over time, and then I learned that emotion science backs this up, that when I write with a deliberate effort to be supportive, encouraging, warm, positive, optimistic, confident for my students' success, it helps them engage and learn. So now when I write an announcement, not even a recorded one, when I write an announcement, it reads like this. Hey, everybody, you're doing a great job so far in class. Thank you for all the work that you're doing. As a reminder, we have a quiz on Tuesday. Don't forget there are some support services that you can access just in my own voice and with a deliberate attempt to be my cheerleading self. Now, here, keep this in mind. You can't write or say anything that is not authentic to you. I mean, you could, but it won't be as successful. So whether you see yourself as a cheerleader or a coach or a mentor, I would encourage you to go a little beyond the content and demonstrate and communicate in your words your support and your optimism for your students. It's going to energize them and help them be successful as well. One more quick, very, very practical idea. If you're out in the world or you're online somewhere and you see something in the news or you see some physical thing that you're like, That is why we need to be learning what we're learning. If something gets your attention like that, bring it to class and share it with your students. It's going to literally infect your students with passion, with enthusiasm. So whether you share a link or a smartphone photo of something that you observed when you were out walking your dog, whatever it might be, bring it to class, share your passion. It's going to help your students. Now, we're going to talk about the next thing, and this may not be too surprising. I'm going to encourage us to design for emotion because they are very powerful. We are hardwired to pay attention to whatever gets an emotional response to us. It helps our survivability to notice when something evokes an emotional response. So this is, again, very attention getting. And if you start to think about it and pay attention, you're going to see that advertisers do this all the time, and marketers and the news media does this all the time, deliberately work to get our emotions to get that response. The reason is it works. And when I think about how sometimes I feel distance from my online students, this is a powerful tool that we can use to enliven and energize our students as well. So two basic categories of ways that we can design for emotion. First is the way we present material. If you ever took an English class where you had Shakespeare, you know that typically you struggle through reading on the page, and then oftentimes the teacher or professor will show the video as well, the movie, whatever it might be, to bring it to life. And that's what I mean, the presentation of the materials in ways that help students connect. Whether it's an image that gets their attention, a photo, whether it is a recording. I have a friend who teaches literature online, and he has recordings of the poets narrating their poems because it brings it to life. It helps students, the intonations, the pauses, the emotion that's in the voice helps students understand some of those deeper meanings. So if you teach natural disasters, as an example, I'm pretty sure you probably have some images of destruction caused by some of these things. And that's what I'm talking about. Be very deliberate to use media to present concepts and materials in a way that gets your students' attention. The other kind of main category is, what are we asking students to do, and is that eliciting any emotional response? Because if we can elicit an emotional response, it embeds that learning more deeply. And this can be something that's fun. There's a well-known statistics assignment, there we go, called Bungee Jumping Barbie. It has students to calculate multiple linear regressions to figure out just how much cord Barbie needs before she goes splat on the rocks. It's funny, and it's statistics. So think about designing for fun, for enjoyment, for engagement. Think about whether a more sobering assignment would be necessary, something that would kind of get your students to explore the gravity of an activity or, of a concept or a situation. So thinking about what we're asking students to do and maybe designing to evoke an emotional response can be really powerful. Here's a very practical way that we can do just that, and that is to be deliberate, to design for relevance. We know that relevance is a key equity factor. If students see that what they're learning in their class is going to benefit them, but even if they see that it relates to their daily lives, once again, they're going to be more motivated, more engaged, and they are therefore going to learn more effectively. So how do we design for relevance? Well, one of my favorite ways is to use the discussion forum, which, let's admit, can feel kind of dry and stilted, to ask students questions about their own lives that relates to what we're learning, right? So maybe you're teaching an organizational psychology class and you ask students, have you ever had a supervisor that, modeled this leadership theory, or was the exact opposite, a toxic leader? And asking students to reflect on how their experience in daily lives connect with what they're learning in class, hugely powerful. Lots of ways that you can do this. It can be something in terms of assignment prompts, or maybe perhaps reflective journaling, which I believe is coming up in today's topic. It can be an agenda that we're going to be looking at next. It can be something as simple as, look, let's have a quiz question that in a physics class that is about how airplanes move through the sky. It can be something in terms of asking students to identify how what they're learning in your class relates to or connects to what they're learning in other classes, something right out of Jim's original small teaching. Help students see connections, build connections, help them see how what they're learning in your class is going to benefit them in their future career or on the job or even in the next class down the line. There's a really great article that came out in 2014 in the scholarly literature. The title is Boring But Important, and then it has a wordy subtitle. But basically, the researchers showed that when students knew for a fact that the mundane and tedious homework sets or exercise sets were going to help them be more successful in the lab someday or in the career, that when students knew that, they were willing voluntarily to set aside social media, Hulu, Netflix, video games, and do those mundane, tedious jobs, or main tasks. So, be explicit in telling students how what they're doing is going to help them, how it relates, give them opportunities to explore the relevance and the connections as well. Now, speaking of connections, I think that one of the main problems that we have in online classes is, again, this distance that happens just as a result of the format itself. And so, because we know that it doesn't necessarily just happen that we can greet our students in the hall or ask them chit chat, how's your day been going? I'm going to invite us to think about being deliberate in the way that we create opportunities for social connections. Remember that social presence is just as important as anything else. And so I have an activity that I'll invite you to engage with here with me right now. This is something that you could do as an individual assignment, something that could be a discussion forum, something that you could do every week. And that is to ask your students to engage in different ways, not related to the content necessarily. So I'm going to ask you right now, and if you would like to respond, please put a word in the chat box that represents which photo you choose, and maybe a couple of words about why you choose that photo. Which picture best describes the way you're feeling about your weekend? It's Saturday, we're here. Which picture best shows the way you're feeling about your weekend? I see mountains, balloons, dogs. I see the hummingbird because spring and new life. I see the window, lots of work to do. I know, me too. The mountains, maybe you're looking and you're aspiring to summit those heights. Love it. Thank you for responding in this way. It's a great weekend, says that dog. Yes, I understand. My family also wants me to go see the new Dungeons and Dragons movie after this. I don't know, whatever. The hummingbird because it's spring, dog because we're happy. So look at what we just did here. This is an activity that you could use if you want to. And what it does is it invites these quick little connections between each other, right? So that maybe some of you saw that other people chose the same thing that you did, or they had a different reason, but chose the same image. I just connected with somebody about giving away the time to the family, which is important as well. And so balloons, walk outside. This is a nice way to change up the energy. If you happen to be teaching in person or live synchronous online, just a nice way to kind of hear from your students and just invite people to kind of check in with themselves. Now, you can ask this question however you want to. Which picture best shows how your morning is going? Or which picture best shows how your weekend was? Or you can keep it a little more academic. Which picture best shows how you're feeling about our upcoming project or all of your classes this semester? So I like this activity as a way to be intentional to foster quick connections with our students and between our students as well. Now I'm going to describe one more way that, this could be a talk in and of itself, but I'm just going to talk about one more way that we can design for inclusive social connections. And that's an activity that I first learned about from an instructor in Wisconsin, and I call it Share One Photo. And all it is it's a way to get to know who your students are so that they are not just names in a grade book, because that still happens to me. I have to be very intentional about this. I did this in my online class first in fall of 2021, and I created it as an individual assignment. This would also be a really interesting discussion forum. It could even be a weekly discussion forum. But here's the way it works. Here's the key factor. You ask students to go to their photo library in their smartphone, not to go take a new picture, but go look at your library and choose one that is really meaningful to you that you want to share with me if it's an individual assignment, or with the class if you do it as a discussion forum. And then write a few words about why that is meaningful. This could be a file upload. It could be something that students paste into a Word doc and submit, or lots of different ways to do this logistically. But we know that students, sometimes they're a little concerned about, what am I supposed to do? So I gave this example to my students. This is my family at Disneyland, where we love to go as well. And this is the Jungle Cruise, which is the best ride, clearly. And so I just chose this really, pretty trivial example, and I wrote pretty much what I just said. This is something we like to do. I was really blown away with what my students chose to share with me. And to be fair, this was an individual assignment. They might not have done this if it were a discussion forum, which is something you'd want to think through. But I saw pictures of their pandemic pets. I saw pictures of them out hiking. I saw pictures of them with disadvantaged youth in their local community in which they serve as mentors in community organizations. And I saw so many pictures of the extended family. And my students would write, "My family is everything to me. They are getting me through this degree." And it just, wow, talk about motivation. It just, look at this, I'm almost going to tear up again. it just really is a great way to get to know who your students are. Now, class size, would impact how much you could do these kinds of things, but I'm going to encourage you to think about maybe making room. Maybe we take something off the syllabus or off the schedule in order to have more assignments that are beyond the content, that foster the connections. And again, in a few minutes, we'll turn our attention to structural kinds of activities and assignments that are beyond the content to help our students learn. In fact, we're actually going to turn to that right now. So there it is right there. So I just encourage us to think about ways that we can communicate with our students yes, the balloons, the sunshine, the celebration, the being outside, absolutely. And I trust that we are going to have that time when we're done with this amazing conference as well. So now we're going to look at some very practical things. We talked a lot about social and emotional because I truly think that's actually the most important thing that we can do in all of our teaching, but especially online teaching when there's the natural distance that exists with the screens. But maybe that's not your bag. Maybe some of that stuff is like, oh, that's pretty warm and fuzzy. Once again, there's robust evidence to show it actually predicts student learning. So it's not just warm and fuzzy, but maybe we're ready for something else. Here we have some extremely practical strategies that are going to help students persist and learn, because we know that students struggle in online classes. Attrition rates are higher than in-person classes. You've probably experienced this if you've been teaching online for any amount of time. So as I just mentioned, I'm going to recommend a couple of ways that we can include assignments that sort of help students overcome any challenges and push through any kind of barriers in order to help them persist, because we know that this is a unique challenge in online teaching and learning. The first one is a goals contract, and I really think there's so much potential with this. You would do this probably at the beginning of the semester. It could be an interesting midterm activity, though. And the way this works is that you are going to ask students to identify their own strategy to be successful, and in so doing, they're going to see that they can take responsibility for their learning, right? We can't do it for them. They need to step up and engage. And this activity kind of gives them a structured way to do that. So what we do is we ask our students to identify 2 goals, 1 action to support their success, 1 challenge that may come up, and 1 strategy. What could they do if that happens? So if I were a student in your class, maybe my goals are very performance oriented. I want to get at least an 80% on all quizzes and never turn in any assignments late. The action is that I have blocked off time on my weekly calendar and I've scheduled time when I'm going to log in and do classwork. The challenge, what if my laptop goes on the fritz? Or what if, like my 18-year-old daughter did in the fall, I spill water on it? How am I going to continue with my online classes? Well, the strategy, maybe there's a resource available to me if I'm near a college campus. Maybe there's a computer lab, or maybe there's a facility on the base, or maybe there's a family member, or maybe there's a way that I can check out or borrow a computer in order to do my work. And what this does is it plants the seed in students' mind that when an inevitable challenge comes up, because something will, life happens, that it's not game over, that they have the opportunity to overcome that challenge. And so it doesn't even matter if that challenge comes up, it just kind of plants that seed. Now, you could also, it would be very interesting to sort of come back to your students, maybe later in the semester, if you did this in week 1, and say, how are we doing with our goals? Do we need to make any adjustments? Because that's a key element of self-regulated learning, is to set those goals, monitor how it's going, adjust as needed. And again, you can kind of embed these practices that are going to help students in all walks of life. You can make it part of your syllabus and sort of provide that structure for them. And in fact, that's my next idea here, is to provide a little more accountability and structure than we might think we need, or than you might have in your in-person classes. Because what we know about online is it takes a lot more independence and autonomy for students to be successful. They need to have well-developed executive functioning skills. But we also know that students who choose asynchronous online courses and programs have complicated lives. And as we know here at Park University, and in my work too, we want to support those people. We want to make it possible for them to get their degrees. So a little bit more accountability and structure is where we can provide this kind of support. For example, faculty often ask me, I have these explainer videos, but it seems like the students don't watch them. Well, you know what? I would assign points to pretty much anything you want your students to do. And that's not exactly my overall grading philosophy, but it is for online classes, quite frankly, because students are busy leading complex lives, and they have competing demands on their time that are very worthwhile. Maybe they have to decide whether they're going to take an extra shift to help pay for groceries or spend a little time on classwork. And so providing a little more accountability and structure can take the form of weekly reading quizzes. It can take the form of, hey, just shoot me a quick reflection and assignment that says you watched my announcement video and here's what you got out of it. Lots of ways that we can just embed a little bit more accountability and support as part of the classwork, as part of the goal setting and monitoring activities. Another thing that we can do is just to pay a little closer attention to the few students who might need a little support. So for example, maybe a lot of your students are doing just fine, but maybe there's a few who could use a nudge. And this is based on the research about how nudges can help people make more wise choices, more better choices, basically, like providing a salad bar right up front instead of the dessert station. We can do this by just kind of checking and keeping a little bit of an eye on how students are doing. Now, I like to do this on day 3 of an online class. I like to log in and see who has not logged in yet. And then I send a quick individual message to those students and say, hey, I notice you haven't logged in yet. If you're going to be taking this class this time, go ahead and get started. You don't want to fall behind. Or if you're not able to take this class, you probably want to drop it. So just a way to kind of give a little bit of an outreach. One way to do this in a really strategic way that doesn't take a lot of time is to send a general announcement periodically and say, hey, how are you doing? If anybody needs a little bit of extra support, please reach out and we'll make time to talk. What this does is it communicates to all of your students that you care about them, but then you're probably only going to hear from a handful, if that, who might need that little bit of extra support. So it's a way to be extremely strategic. Now, my last topic before we turn to questions is to think a little bit about the cognitive connections, about how we actually process new information, how we learn and remember new information, because we want our students to remember, right? So I am going to go through this analogy, and then I have 2 more strategies, and then it'll be time for your questions. So be ready. This is Michelle Miller, a colleague and friend from Northern Arizona University, a cognitive psychologist. And she has helped me learn about how our long-term memory works. We know that we want students to remember what they're learning beyond the next exam, right? Into the next class, or even just to the final or to the job. Students need to remember what they're learning. And she talks about our long-term memory as having like a vast amount of closet space. We can store an endless amount of information, but the problem is getting it back when we need it. So imagine that you have a big walk-in closet, and maybe you do, but imagine that there are no organizing structures in there whatsoever. No rods, no hangers, no hooks, no cubbies, no drawers, no racks, no nothing. All of your clothes and shoes and accessories are just in a big jumble on the floor. Well, how long would it take you to find the pieces that you want for any given day's outfit? It would be so frustrating sorting through everything. You might just give up and go back to bed. That's what happens in our mental neural network. We, as experts in what we teach, we have a very well-established closet organizational structure. We can go to whatever part of information we need and get it almost instantly. But our students don't have that structure. They don't have an organizational framework. And the thing is, we can't call the closet installation crew to have them come in and install that for our students. They have to make it for themselves in order to retrieve the information that they need to use. 2 ideas, and then ready for questions. First is to activate prior knowledge or experience. And we did this today. At the very beginning, I said, how do you feel about online teaching? That's because I was deliberately getting you to think about your previous experience, what you know about online teaching. And you can do this as simply as I did. It can be a conversational question that you ask in a discussion forum or in a journal, a reflection. What do you already know about this? Because the way this works, when we learn, we hook new information onto things that we already know. We have to find that cognitive connection so we can kind of prime the pump for our students, sort of fertilize the soil for new learning, new seeds and information to take root and thrive just by asking them what they already know. It could take the form of an ungraded quiz or survey. Hey, solve these 5 equations. I want to kind of get us thinking about what we remember about how to do this. So activating prior knowledge is one way, and my last idea for today is to provide the framework. And what I mean by this is just literally a partial note-taking guide or something along that line that allows students to put information into various pre-designated slots or buckets. It can be something as simple as a worksheet, a Word document, or a Google Doc that students fill in. And I love this for like a module guide. Here's where you're going to take notes on the reading. Here's where you're going to answer a few questions from the video. Here's where you're going to, reflect on what you learned from this week's discussion and interacting with your peers. This can also take the form of partial PowerPoint slides that they can fill in and take notes on while they're watching your mini lecture video. This can be something like a flow chart or a partial diagram of cell structures that students have to annotate. You can provide this as an encouragement. I recommend that you use this tool, or you can make it worth points and hold students accountable to do the work. And what this does is that it helps students to organize that new information for themselves and to build those cognitive connections in order to help them remember and learn. So that was a lot. I am sorry. I'm not sorry. But I'm going to finish with one quick question for you, and then I'm ready for your questions. My question for you: what one word describes how you feel about your online teaching now? Maybe it's the same word. Maybe it's something different. But I hope you've gained some new ideas here today. I'm going to turn off those slides because they're a barrier, and I'm ready for any questions.